We're following up on our investigation of the Justice for Black Farmers Act today. And I'm excited because I've been doing a lot more research and going section by section through this act, starting to understand why they've decided to make certain proposals. And it's incredible how each one of these, to me, it's almost impossible to read. I look at the act, I'm going to pull it up right now so y'all can see it with me. It's in legalese, or I guess congressese. Anytime there's like a section point, blah, 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 my eyes glaze over. But behind each and every one of these sections are so many people's stories. And whenever you start to dig in, it's so touching and heartbreaking why these have been proposed and what we might be able to do to support it, how we can start to bring to life some of these stories through our artwork. And our goal, Zach, since you're new to our project here, this Justice for Black Farmers Act was just proposed by Senators Cory Booker, Elizabeth Warren, and what's Gillibrand's first name?
Kirsten
Gillibrand. Thank you. It's just been proposed, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be able to get its time to be approved or not until this coming spring. But this act is what many Black farmers and activists have called a quantum leap forward for Black farmers.
I have to get my book. Keep talking.
Yeah, sure thing. So we've been investigating a little bit, and our goal is to start illustrating postcards and start advocating for our senators and representatives to support this bill whenever it does come in front of them. And I'm hoping that through illustrating it and, maybe making some of these issues more human, that we can hopefully be persuasive and get this bill passed or do our little part through art. So that's our plan. And
how does that sound, Zach?
I am very pleased. I'm very excited to do it.
Yes.
Excellent. So today we're going to be talking about Section 102, the Independent Civil Rights Oversight Board. Why is it that we need an independent civil rights oversight board? And what this is proposing, we're going to kind of just skim through it right quick, is to establish an independent board to oversee civil rights within the USDA. And, blah, 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 requiring that board to oversee any decisions through the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Civil Rights and investigating reports of discrimination. Really, it's spelling out specifically how this has to happen. And you're going to find out why this is also important in just a second. One of the things, empowers the board to provide oversight for Farm Service Agency county committees. So this is going to be essential because this is going to be on a more local level, so that there's going to be civil rights intervention, even on more local level.
This is a national board that's going to oversee local communities?
So
that doesn't sound like that's.
It's a federal, federal board. It's the USDA, the US Department of Agriculture. And, I might need to do a little bit more research into exactly what the Farm Service Agency county committees are. However, I think when you see a little bit more of why they proposed this, you might be persuaded.
Okay.
So this board's also going to make sure that the Black Farmers Act is making progress and authorize an annual report, so that this is going to, civil rights kind of check-ins are going to be something that are regularly done. So let's see why that happens. And I'm going to make a note to Judith. I'm going to have to see more about what this all actually entails, because one thing, as usual, that I've learned researching more about this is it's all so much more complicated than when you first peek at, what's going on. So why is an independent civil rights oversight board what we're going to need? And what the article that I came across, and this is from 2009, so this is dated. However, I was checking around, and the key understandings we're going to get here are still valid, and although things have been happening since then. This article called "The Last Plantation," and I posted it in the anti-racist art class group if you want to read it all at your leisure. But what is the last plantation? That is what many Black farmers still refer to as the USDA. So whenever many Black farmers are thinking about where they're going to get their farm loans, the last thing they want to do is go to the last plantation. And there is an interview, which is also posted in our group with this farmer here, Eddie Slaughter, where he explains in his own words, what the last plantation is all about. And I encourage you to watch that when you get a chance. So Black farmers in general, whenever they're going to get their loans, and we've talked about in the past how farmers operate on loans. Every single year, you're going to need to borrow a lot more in advance, but before you're able to buy the seed, the fertilizer, upgrade your equipment. You need that big, huge grant before you can work your farm. It's a really unfortunate part of the farming system that it requires huge credit to be able to make your profit. So Black farmers say, the last resort, the absolute last thing you want to do is go to the USDA because of story after story of discrimination. And so instead of calling it the last resort, they started referring to it as the last plantation. Because to them, they say it reminds them of back in, and I'm quoting from the interview I was just talking to you about, the old sharecropping model, where with sharecropping, you would get a big loan from the person who's supposed to be, supporting your sharecropping endeavor. You farm your land, but then you bring it back in and they say, oh, shucks, you're short $3,000. You're just going to have to keep sharecropping this land and continuing in debt, almost like a indentured servitude sort of thing. So we've talked about different forms of slavery by another name. But let's look. I just went ahead and took some notes so we don't have to read this entire article of some facts. And these are the facts that perhaps you can start taking notes of, or just think about what you want to include on the back of your postcard. Because these are the statistics and the ideas that we want to use to persuade our representatives. So some of the key stats from this article, and we've talked a little bit about this before, that in 1920, at the height of Black farm ownership, 1 in 7 farms was Black operated. Just under 1 million Black-owned farms were in operation, and it was about 14% of the farms that were out there, which was very, very relative, or close to, in general, Black population in the States. However, by 1992, that number has fallen to 1 in 100 Black-owned farms. It's like less than 45,000. So that's led some to call the USDA the last plantation. And these are just some ideas of what we might be drawing today. Some plantations. So this is straight from the article, and I'm just going to read, unless somebody else wants to read.
I'll read if you want.
Sure, this paragraph right here.
Black farmers tell stories of USDA officials, especially local loan authorities and all-white county committees in the South. So here we have our county committees again. Mm-hmm. Spitting on them, throwing their loan applications in the trash, and illegally denying them loans. This happened for decades, through at least the 1990s. When the USDA's local offices did approve loans to Black farmers, they were often supervised. Farmers couldn't spend the borrowed money without receiving item-by-item authorization from the USDA, or late. And in farming, timing is everything. Meanwhile, white farmers were receiving unsupervised, on-time loans. Many say egregious discrimination by local loan officials persists today.
Thank you for that. And if you did listen to part 1 and part 2 of the 1619 podcast about the provost story, then you'll recognize a lot of this. Carol, you're nodding?
I listened to, I listened to the second part this week too. It's so painful.
And this is exactly what they went through, almost to the T. So they got a local bank loan, and even though they were awarded as, being known as some of the very most productive farmers in their county, other farmers went to them to get advice. They had great reputation, long history of success with their farms. This Black farmer, June Provost, was at first given much less money than he actually needed, but critically, all of the loans that he was receiving from this local bank were late, and you can't farm, in the wrong season. You just don't grow anything. And that kept them in the cycle of not growing the amount of sugarcane, in that case, that was going to be able to give them returns on their crops that would help them pay back the loans. And so then you're locked in this vicious cycle where you're undercut and you're unable to make a profit. And then eventually you're not able to even keep your land. And that's really the huge tragedy that is an epidemic in Black farming. We went in less than 100 years from a representative proportion of Black farmers to almost none. And that didn't happen by accident. That didn't happen because Black farmers just didn't feel like farming anymore. It's been a mix of some different factors, but definitely just systemic discrimination, especially from the USDA. So this is just a heartbreaking story. I thought maybe someone might illustrate it. I don't know how, but Lloyd Wright, who directed the USDA's Civil Rights Department in 1997 through 1998, remembers a farmer whose land was foreclosed and sold by the government while his civil rights claim was pending. We found that the Department of Agriculture was guilty, but we couldn't really compensate him because his land was gone, Wright reports. So this is a case where, and there's more research that shows that the Civil Rights Department inside of the USDA is just awful. But even whenever it was shown that, oh yeah, no, this farmer was terribly discriminated against and he needs to get his money and his land back, they couldn't do it. It just was already gone. And so it's like, sorry, I can't help you. That farmer is out of luck. And so some of the language in the act appears to address exactly these issues, if not giving them their exact land back, hopefully giving them some land back and going back in time and correcting for these mistakes that were not helped in the act that is commonly referred to in farming, the Pigford Act. So what is the Pigford Act? This kind of goes into why the USDA Civil Rights Department is so messed up. So here's another little story for you. In 1997, a group of Black farmers led by Tim Pigford of North Carolina filed a class action suit against the USDA. They argued that they had been systematically discriminated against by the agency and that the mechanism for challenging such discrimination was useless. They had been filing complaints for years to a civil rights office without knowing that President Ronald Reagan had disbanded it in 1983.
Oh my God.
And nobody said a word. So people who are trying their very best, trying to follow the letter of the law, to a civil rights office that had been operating up until that point, never got any, for over 10 years, was 1997. Oh my gosh. Fortunately, this led to a $2.3 billion settlement. The government did say, yes, okay, we screwed up here. And this is actually the largest civil rights settlement in US history. So this was in 1999. And I'm forgetting if they call it Pigford versus something. They do refer to it, Pigford versus Glickman. And this goes to also section 103, an equity commission, which is going to address a lot of the issues that came up in Pigford. But in Pigford versus Glickman, oops, where do we go? Yeah, why do we need to go back and investigate this again? And this is kind of what I'm thinking, like, how can we talk to our representatives? Because they might be thinking in their head, we already paid out the largest civil rights settlement in US history. Why do we need to go back and address it? We've already given out $2.3 billion. So why? It's a great question. First of all, Pigford versus Glickman only addressed discrimination that happened in the 15 years between 1981 and 1996, which Black farmers are saying, you know what? There was actually more discrimination from before and after that. It wasn't just in that 15-year window. And especially in that YouTube interview, you can hear a firsthand account of what it was like as a farmer to have to choose between taking $50,000 and a whole lot of legalese that was basically like, well, maybe we'll help you keep your land, but we are gonna cancel your debts. If you just take this $50,000, oh, it's gonna be so much easier for you. Or they had to option two, present a really detailed paper trail saying, I lost $2 million, which is a little bit more realistic, you know, when you're looking at the June Provost story, the farmers in Louisiana we've been following, millions of dollars go into farms. You know, if you don't have that paper trail saying exactly what happened when and showing where the discrimination happened, you aren't going to get the full value of your land. And in the case of the provosts, man, please do go listen to that. I remember what blew my mind was when one of the bankers in that story kind of, I don't remember if it was illegal or not, but he snuck in and got his hands on the provost paperwork. And to me, that seems like the nail in the coffin of his loan story was there was in his application proof that his grant request had been adjusted, or what's that word? Like someone illegally
Modified.
Altered,
modified.
yeah.
So the bank slashed the $2 million that he needed to really run his farm and said, oh, this guy only needs $800,000 or something, which was just malicious discrimination.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of this just seems evil. Like,
Yeah.
how can you not tell a whole, like, a community of people that there wasn't the USDA was like, it completely disbanded the well, I'm sorry, I can't read it.
The civil rights
Yeah, like it
office.
just
Completely evil. Absolutely. I mean, it's a sad and unfortunate story, and I can't postulate why this is specific, or I don't know, maybe it's not specific to the US Department of Agriculture, but the US Department of Agriculture has a very bad reputation.
This is going through decades and many presidents. And it seems, I trust this information, but it seems almost inconceivable that it could continue and still continue.
But
You
I
know,
mean,
there was a
of us who are not farmers think about the plight of farmers until it's, you know, put into our face for some reason.
or even the day-to-day life. Like, I never knew farmers needed huge loans every single year to operate, you know? And then if you think about what it takes to get a loan, credit, you know, a lot of legal stuff, whenever you have a population that's already kind of doesn't necessarily always have access to some of those, that kind of background, it makes it harder for them already.
Wasn't there a movie where Sally Field, I don't know if she gets widowed or something, and everyone thinks she's going to have to give up her farm, and she goes for the loan, and they put her through the same kind of.
Because she's a
So female discrimination.
Yeah, female discrimination.
women can't run farms.
I mean, this just kind of points the finger at a system that only advances white landowning males.
Correct.
Which is very much in our nation's history. And there was a comment, just a quote from some farmer saying in one of these articles, I can't even remember, I've read so many lately, if someone from like the Clinton family or and he just like named a bunch of rich white, politically
The Bushes or something.
families, like if any of them had had this kind of issue with the USDA getting loans, this would have been addressed. And so one of the things they're suggesting is that because especially, black farmers don't necessarily have those contacts in high places, that's one of the things that makes justice happen, unfortunately, is like, who do you know? And if you don't know anybody who's going to advocate for you, or you don't know anybody who's going to bring a legal case together, like there's just so little you can do.
So I just decided to do something different than I did last week. So last week, Zach, we talked about creating a postcard and sending it to all the House and the Senate.
Right.
And so I already drew out one postcard, but I think I want to do 4 postcards, like print out a sheet that's 4 up.
Ooh.
And then ask my friends to send the other postcards to the same people. So it's not me sending 4 postcards, but 4 different looking postcards from 4 different people.
Ooh, good strategy.
Cool.
Good
Good.
idea.
Yeah, I'm still thinking how I'm going to do mine, if I want to try and make them all like individually hand drawn, or maybe get some kind of templates and then get them printed up. I don't know yet.
That's a couple of hundred to individually hand draw them.
Yeah, that might not be realistic.
That might not be.
We'll see.
Let's set manageable goals when we're done.
Right. Or maybe I just need to keep doing more classes. And, I feel like once I get this presentation really tight, it might be, excuse me, something I can get some more groups together, like friends, and just say, hey, we're going to have a postcard anti-racist meetup, like come and draw and bring a blank postcard.
If you get that together, I would have a meetup. I guess we'd have to Zoom the meetup.
Yeah.
But I would do that. I would show them a short presentation, talk about it, and then give them the list of names, where to mail, what to mail.
Let's do it, you guys. We're gonna inundate them with postcards.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't think they get artistic postcards all that often. So hopefully they will make a difference.
Well, it sounds like there's no point sending them till next spring, so we have a lot of time to accumulate some stacks, because there's no point in sending them in the chaos that's today's.
Correct, but it's going to take a while to get this all together, so we shouldn't let it. We should keep moving on it.
We've been talking, I've also been reading why Pigford needs to be even though they gave out that many $1 billion, 9 out of 10 Black farmers were denied.
Yes. Often because of technicalities. And that was what they found, is the USDA then spent $12 million and thousands of man hours individually contesting the Pigford farmers, like finding technicalities to reject them on their claims. And in the end, even though Pigford was passed, there were no structural changes to stop the discrimination. So they said, hey, slap on the wrist. We just had to pay out billions of dollars, but hey, just don't do it again. But they didn't do anything to actually make sure that anything would change. So that is what the Justice for Black Farmers Act does, is it creates these oversight boards, the Equity Commission, or whatever it was called, to help ensure that wouldn't happen again. So this is a May 2008 report saying that the civil rights group in the USDA still is deficient.
I wonder, it's 12 years later, I wonder if it still is, or whether there's been structural change.
Very well, I think that's what this bill is addressing. And that's why, they want to work through it. And so that's, going back to the actual bill, this is going to kind of go back and help people who did not receive payments to investigate and see, like, well, is this a person who was rejected on a technicality who really should have gotten their money? Or another thing that happened was many Black farmers weren't told in time, or they just didn't know that they had the opportunity to apply for the Pickford reparations, kind of popped in my head, and help get them their money. Although in the end, you hear from some of the Black farmers and they just want their land back. But that's going to be the next conversation, perhaps next week, is the actual Black farmer land grants, which is a whole nother section. We're still on the first page of this bill.
Yeah,
So,
go back up.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are the two sections I've been kind of digging into. And yeah, let's see what else.
So the Pickford ended though in, it's not like somebody can go now and claim.
Exactly, 1996.
Right, got it.
Mm-hmm.
Carol, you've probably been drawing. I haven't done any drawing, but I've been writing.
No, I've been writing too, Judith. You've,
Yeah.
reading and writing and listening, and just, I mean, the echoes are going through my mind of the white farmer who got June Provost's land,
Mm-hmm.
saying that June must have been a terrible farmer and didn't work hard. I mean, it's
Right.
just lazy Black people. And, so either he didn't know or didn't want to know that he'd been an award-winning farmer.
Exactly.
There was nothing, absolutely nothing incompetent or lazy about him.
Mhm.
And he's one of the most passionate farmers I've ever heard. Just,
His
got
love.
sugar in his blood.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyway, so yeah, I've been writing and reading and thinking, but not drawing.
well, it reminds me also of what Kindy says, that sometimes racism shows up in seeing people, not policies. So you look around and you say, oh, here's this guy, June Provost, and he didn't get his grant. And look, he wasn't planting a sugarcane at the right time. He must be a terrible farmer. If you only look at the people and say, what is this individual doing? But when you find out the real story and find out their actual policies and systemic discrimination that have happened to him, that's the reason that he was unable to do what he knew better and would have wanted to be doing. But it's all about seeing the full picture and not just looking at, what that individual is sometimes forced to do. And
Yeah.
that's why this bill is so important.
Jessica, what was that quote again? The Kendi quote?
At the very beginning of How to Be an Anti-Racist, I think chapter 1, he talks about anti-racism is looking at policies, not people. And much of the time looking at a racist viewpoint is looking at people and not policies. And yeah.
But it's interesting because that quote's sort of inadequate. I mean, if you really looked at people in the June Provost story, if you really looked at that person, you would see that he was a good farmer who was screwed and not a bad farmer.
Right. Well, yeah, it's a little vague. The example I think of is looking at, neighborhoods of minorities in general often, and seeing like, oh, they live in this poor neighborhood. They must not have worked hard, or they must, XYZ.
Right.
Up when it's redlining, it's all of the other issues around housing and discrimination that keep those people where they are, not at all their actual, choices in life. So it's pretty complicated. So I had a little thumbnail sketch I'm gonna pop up on the screen here, just of kind of what I was imagining. Oops. I might draw today, and y'all let me know, because of course there's so many ways we can creatively imagine how we might want to illustrate this. So my little thumbnail it's hard to see. I was thinking I could do in some scripted lettering, like the USDA, the last plantation, and then have like one of these images of the plantations and kind of present on one part of the postcard this image, and then on the other part of the postcard write some of these facts and figures, or maybe a story, or just my particular takeaways of what this is all about. But do y'all have any other ideas, or maybe ideas of thumbnails, or what we might draw for this?
Well, last week I had drawn except it's hard to identify, a sugar
cane.
Yeah. But I had the words that came to me that could go on the front. Let me just pull it back up in my notebook. Oh,
I'm right with you too, Judith. I think,
well, so
having a bunch of different ones will be good.
I had put defend the farms of Black farmers, but I thought it's much simpler to just use the words pushed out, help push back justice for Black farmers.
Oh, I love that. I'm writing that down.
Okay, I did totally different. I did, I don't think you can see this, but let's see if you can. I wrote, support the justice for, I want this to be a strong visual message on the front, and then a shorter hand. I want the stats and the message to be on the front of my postcards, and then a shorter handwritten passionate appeal for them to vote for this.
Yes.
So my first one was, oh, can you see this? It's light pencil.
Push it to your left a little bit. And up, and more to the left. Cute little building. Yes, okay, I see it now. It looks great.
So you put a lot more writing on the front.
Right. And kind of like that postcard I showed you I was sending to Georgia. And now, given today's conversation, I think my second one might be a plantation in the background, and on top of it, don't let the USDA continue to be discriminating against Black farmers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a
or stop USDA.
Stop discrimination. I mean, like make it more succinct even.
No, I want it to be the whole message. And then on the back, I'll write something like support the Justice for Black Farmers Act. That's all I'll write.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Zach, what do you?
Off the top of my head, I think I would just do a rendering of American Gothic, but with Black faces, and then just have say nothing on the front. Just have that, and then on the back, maybe use Carol's tagline, slogan, or I don't remember the pushed out,
help push back, support the justice for
and
Black.
just follow that up with I'm sorry, yes, and just and follow that up with some of the stats about how in 1920 1 in 7 farms were Black operated, in 1992 1 in 92.
1 in 100.
1 in 100. We don't even know what it is now, do we? Or do we? Jessica, you've been doing the research.
Gotta be out there. I didn't I don't know off the top of my head, but I think it's closer to that 1 in 100. It hasn't been growing, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I like the American Gothic idea. I don't know if you could see, Zach, that in the side of mine next to the plantation there.
That was the whole idea last week. Cool. Yeah. Another thing I've been thinking is also just getting some big scripty, beautiful numbers, like maybe draw 45,000, or like just basically make the numbers itself like a scripted letter, like pretty lettering text, so that really pops out, just a percentage on one side, and then flip it and you're like, oh, 72% of farmers have been pushed out of their land, or whatever it is.
Oh, I like that.
Illustrating the statistics is another thing I was thinking of doing.
Great. Well, I mean, what I love, of course, is that there's space for all of our ideas. I mean, we're not trying to
No
come,
shortage.
we're not a corporation trying to come up with one template.
Right.
I love that.
And I so appreciate y'all getting creative and brainstorming different ways that we can use art to be persuasive with these ideas. It's like art activism. I love it so much. So how about we practice drawing a plantation? Go ahead and dive on in with our art part.
Okay.
I'm gonna pop up these images right here. Do you want me to keep both of them up, or is there one in particular y'all would like to draw from? Of course, the color one is kind of nice. It's a little less.
I like the color. I like the way the trees arch too.
Yeah, I like the color one too.
So my idea is to kind of have in some pretty lettering USDA kind of up where the trees are, and then down here the last plantation, or maybe flip it, maybe say the last plantation, the USDA. That's my idea I'm playing around with right now. But you're welcome to do what you like. And while we're drawing, would you like me to play some audio related to this, or would y'all like to draw and chat? What would y'all like to do?
I'm okay with that.
I like being able to chat if we feel inclined to chat.
Sounds good.
I wanted to ask you guys if you happen to follow Grey's Anatomy.
No.
Okay, so Grey's Anatomy for the past 2 weeks, last night and a week ago, has been focusing on COVID in the hospital.
Wow.
You know what Grey's Anatomy is? It's a doctor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Zach, you know what it is?
I do.
I know it's in the hospital, but is there anything more than that?
Well, you follow a certain number of characters in the hospital.
Okay.
That's all you have to know for this. And this week, it hit the mother of one of the head doctor, who is African American. It hit a bunch of their family and friends. And the mother of this African American woman had been in a senior home. She had Alzheimer's, and all of a sudden she finds out that her mother is deathly ill. She has her husband, who is an EMT, go get the mother, bring her to the hospital. And in the course of the show, she goes in and out of her Alzheimer's by the daughter singing her a song that they both sing together, and then the mother kind of connects to the song. Anyway, she does die at the end. And the two of the significant members, who were both on the board of the hospital but are doctors there, are standing shaking their heads about all these deaths. One's African American, one's not. And the one that's not says, how could it be that 50% of our COVID patients are Black or brown when they don't represent 50% of our population? And that's like the last line of the show. And then on the screen, they scroll all the names of people who have died in that city.
Wow.
I thought that was A, very powerful, and B, unusual for a TV show to be doing that right now. And I just was pleased that they were, but I thought I would share that.
That is very powerful.
Jessica, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, that's actually one of the subjects that I've been thinking we need to discuss, because it's absolutely horrendous and so incredibly heartbreaking. The statistics behind care, or the lack thereof, for Black people going to the hospital, but especially for Black mothers, for Black women. It's like, I think they're 4 times, if not more likely to die in childbirth. And they're just some, stories that it gets me emotional even thinking about having the what you hear, like first person stories of completely preventable deaths in childbirth, of doctors not listening to the mother, neglect, not to mention, you know, the environmental factors for many Black people who have been systemically stuck in neighborhoods or areas that have more environmental risks that are going to lead to more asthma, more diabetes, all kinds of health related issues that put you then at higher risk for things like COVID. But it's murder. Like, I don't know how else to put it. It just doesn't, we're just not taking care of people who go to the hospital to be cared for. So we'll get to that for sure at some point in these conversations.
Yeah. Seems like everywhere we turn, there's such disappointment in our systems.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know. I think that I have spent most of my life being just too naive, thinking we're America, we do everything right, and we don't.
Yeah. Well, things have been built in such a way where they're encouraging you not to think about it. You know, they're encouraging you to just.
I mean, I'm not involved with that level of education, but haven't we heard that, I mean, they don't often even have civics classes in high school?
Yeah.
Civics is in like how to be a good citizen kind of things.
Well, civics and how our government runs. How there's 3 branches of government, and you know, I'm just real basic stuff.
I think that's in the core curriculum now.
Okay.
I don't know, because some of these Trump supporters, when they talk about how things are supposed to be, and they seem to think our government works much differently than it does.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
It almost seems like the government classes are more history and not like an actual survey or like an exploration of like what the government does, why it does.
Oh, I think that's true. Yes, that's a good point.
And a very whitewashed history. You know, if you think about how they talk about Martin Luther King, just as a little example of like, oh, he just wanted peace and all he did were peaceful protests, and, you know, he was not, everybody loved him, and white America opened its arms, and the civil rights was just naturally going to happen, and now there's no discrimination. It's like, you know, when at the time, from what I understand, he was a real revolutionary and people were really angry at what he was proposing.
Yeah, my husband, I read Stamped from the beginning. My husband is reading it now. So, you know, I'm revisiting. I mean, just.
You read what?
Stamped from the beginning, Kendi's book about the history of racist policies in this country, starting from the very beginning. It's a hefty tome, but it's a fast read at one level because it's like a gripping whodunit story. And then, yeah, it's got so much information in it. And you know, he's up to the point now about reading about Lincoln. And I mean, when you know, the great emancipator, but he wanted to send the Blacks all to Africa.
Right. Well,
I mean, we didn't hear that part of the story in my American history.
Yeah, that reminds me of when we did the 40 acres and a mule lesson, that I guess it was Sherman who had all of the Black families who were fleeing the slave, the plantations, following the army, and he was like, "Hey, listen, we got to do something with you guys. What do you want? Where can we send you that is not here? Because I can't take care of you. I got to go fight a war." And they got kind of 20 leaders from the Black population there, and they said, "Well, we want our own land. Like, land is what we need to build our communities and to keep away from the white people. We don't think that we're going to be able to thrive, integrated with white families right now." And that is shocking to hear now, because we think of integration and kind of assimilation as the goal. Like, oh, one day no one will see color and we're all going to be equal. But that it sounds like they did want to have their own space, not to necessarily be sent back to Africa. Like, actually, I think Thomas Jefferson was also in that same camp. Jefferson
and they didn't want to be, when Lincoln asked them, some representative leaders, they absolutely didn't want to be sent back to Africa. That wasn't their home.
No.
Rough as it had been.
That's what's happening now with ICE, when they want to send back people.
Right.
Back people who were born here or who have never lived in these countries they want to send them to.
Oh my gosh, thank you for bringing that up. Such a good.
How much time do we have? Because I want to tell you a story.
Ooh, 5 minutes. Go for it.
Okay, so we're talking about this as an African-American issue, but there was a docudrama based on a true story that I saw several years ago in my film class about two brothers in Poland. One of them is farming the family farm, and one of them has come to America. And the one who's come to America is called back to his hometown by some of his friends who tell him that his brother's doing strange things. They're not Jewish, by the way. So he goes back to Poland, and he finds out that his brother is uncovering Jewish tombstones that the Germans have used to pave roads and build walls, etc. And he's planting them kind of haphazardly, putting them in his field. And this is peculiar. So anyway, the brother has to go and get some document, a loan. I think he has to get a loan for the farm. And the two brothers get dressed up and they go into town, and the banker says, "Well, I don't really think this is your farm. It's not really your father's farm or your grandfather's farm." So the US brother goes, the farmer brother goes back to farm, and the US brother goes to the Hall of Records, and he's going through the records, and sure enough,
oh my gosh,
his farm and a whole bunch of other farms were not originally where they are now. They're kind of in this not very good farmable land along the riverbank. And he goes to the riverbank where he now thinks his grandfather's farm was, and father, and he finds the remnants of a building. I'm cutting this short, but it's still long. Finds the remnants of a building, and he goes into what would have been the cellar. And there are all these things written by Jewish people on the wall. Make a much longer story short, and this is a true story.
Wow.
They the villagers had rounded up the Jewish farmers, brought them to the cellar of his father's farmhouse.
Oh my God.
Locked them in and set them on fire.
Ugh.
And then took their farms. So he's besides himself upset. He goes to tell his brother. His brother doesn't want to hear this because he wants to keep farming the family farm. The townspeople get upset with the farmer brother, and the U.S. Anyway, the U.S. brother goes back to the United States, and the last scene is there's a Jewish group that goes to pay homage to Holocaust
Locations.
gravesites.
Mm.
And the brother has brought them from the United States in this, and there's this bus, and they come out and they go into the field where all the gravestones are. And in Jewish tradition, if you go to visit a grave, you put a little stone on the grave, on the headstone. And that's the end of this movie. But it's not unlike, in its own way, what we're talking about
Oh yeah,
here.
that's
So now that I've
all too familiar.
told you a grim story, sorry.
That's unfortunately kind of what we're here for.
Yeah,
And that's another, or go ahead.
it's an appalling story, but I'm sure there are lots of stories like that.
Yeah.
And it was a true story.
Thank you for sharing, Judith.
Yeah. Ooh.
And you said that's in Denmark?
No, it was in Poland.
Poland. Wow.
Guys, I have to run. I have an appointment in just a minute, but I want to show you my little plantation sketch.
Yes, please. Oh my God, that's so good.
It turned out great.
Nice.
That's great. I'm having a lot of trouble with this. This is good to see.
Well, guys, this is always so illuminating, pardon me. It's wonderful.
Glad you're back, Zach. Oh, next week we have that field trip, I think.
Oh,
right?
yes.
Field trip.
I'll tell you about it later.
Yes.
Excellent. Yay, excited. Bye, friends.
Bye.
Bye.
And
Oh, it's 12 o'clock already?
it is 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock in New York. So it is our time.
So I've done almost nothing on this because I was telling you the story, and because I'm having a lot of trouble, even though I like to do buildings.
I've been drawing 4 letters this whole time. So
Will you post the picture of the
absolutely. Let me show
Okay,
you.
so I've got my last plantation more or less here.
I want Zach's drawing.
Huh?
I want to just have Zach's drawing. I don't want to do this.
I'm actually thinking I'm gonna get a good drawing done and then just trace it and then use it as a template and make a whole bunch. Is kind of what I'm.
Oh, that's an idea.
But I do have. I mean, we've got a whole act, and we're only on the first 2 sections, so we're probably gonna end up with a lot of different ideas for more and more postcards.
Okay, so I got what you had suggested for this one.
Oh, nice. Yes. Great job.
Getting
Plantation
some
is great
trees in there.
Mhm.
And I made, because I didn't want to, anyway, I traced a postcard I had so I'd know
Oh, good.
like what a postcard size is so that it's in proportion. Ah,
What I'm wondering is how to get the like if I should just buy some blank postcards or
Well,
kinda-
if
I've got a lot of-
if you're going to print them up, you should
Mhm.
probably put like 4 on a page and bring them to Kinko's. If you're
Yeah.
going to hand do each one, which I think is way too ambitious in my opinion.
Mhm.
oh, look at
I spent a little time working on just the USDA.
Right.
So
doing three-dimensional lettering. Cool.
yeah, I want to get the lettering really like eye-catching. But yeah, Judith, you're right. If I'm going at this speed with the lettering, I probably won't be able to do 100. Well, thank you both for being here and for diving deep on this subject today.
Oh
and
my God,
sharing
thank
your
you.
stories.